From as far back as I can remember, I was obsessed with the idea of flying. While other kids were busy racing toy cars or dreaming about becoming sports stars, I was picturing myself gliding above the clouds, far from the earth below. Growing up, my family didn't have much money, so I knew I'd have to work hard to chase that dream of becoming a pilot. No matter what life threw at me, that dream guided every decision I made. As I got older, I took on every job I could find to save up for flight school. Whether it was pulling long hours at a local cafe or mowing lawns around the neighborhood, I did whatever it took. When I finally earned my pilot's license, I felt like all that effort had been worth it. Soon after, I started flying for the Air Force Reserve. But once my time in the reserve ended, I hit a rough patch. A hiring freeze with the big commercial airlines left me working for a smaller regional carrier. Through it all, my wife, Emma, was always there for me. Emma and I had been inseparable since childhood. We grew up in the same small town, and from the moment I told her I wanted to be a pilot in middle school, she said, "Take me with you." We got married as soon as we could after high school. Emma was tall, thin, and had big, bright eyes. Her smile could light up a room, even though she had a few quirks, like her love for collecting postcards from everywhere we traveled. Despite my modest salary of $28,000 as a regional airline pilot, Emma never complained. We saved up enough to buy a fixer-upper house, and she somehow managed to make it feel like home, no matter where we were. Emma got a job working for a local real estate firm, and together, we made things work. Life wasn't perfect, but we enjoyed what we had and made the best of every moment. Every morning, Sam, our lead mechanic at the airline, gave me a ride to work. Sam was one of those guys who could fix just about anything and had helped me rebuild my old pickup truck more than once. He had come to the U.S. from Puerto Rico with his wife, Elena, when they were both in their teens, and he loved to talk about his big family, especially his kids. One morning, Sam's son, Ricky, a freshman in high school, joined us for the ride. After I hopped in, I mentioned I had to drop by Emma's office to give her the cell phone she'd left behind. Ricky, like most teenagers, had his earbuds in and was listening to music, but when he saw the phone, he got curious. He asked to check it out, so I handed it over. A moment later, Ricky said, "Looks like someone's in for a fun afternoon," holding up the screen for me to see. The message read, "Protein bar for lunch, day 2. I was confused and asked Ricky what that meant. He scrolled through a few more texts exchanged between Emma and someone named Mark, her boss. The texts made it crystal clear that they were having an affair. I felt my stomach drop. I asked Sam to take me home right away, while Ricky forwarded the messages to me. I confirmed it. Mark Thomas, Emma's boss at Riverstone Realty, was the sender. It felt like something out of a bad TV show. My wife, having an affair with her boss. Sam, seeing how shaken I was, offered to drive me to a doctor, but I declined. I just needed to be alone. Ricky, not picking up on my need for silence, kept reading the texts aloud. With each one, I felt like someone was twisting a knife deeper into my chest. When we finally got home, I rushed to the bathroom and barely made it before throwing up. I leaned against the wall, head spinning, remembering how Emma and I had painted that bathroom together, arguing over the color of the tiles. The memories only added to the pain. Was this really happening? Mark Thomas was nearly 20 years older than Emma and me, somewhere in his mid-50s. He was the typical flashy real estate guy, always tanned, slim, and with perfectly styled hair, thanks to some strategic hair plugs. He loved to be the center of attention, constantly cracking jokes that ranged from slightly funny to downright inappropriate. I tried to convince myself that maybe this was just another one of his bad jokes, but deep down, I knew better. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to stop by Emma's office, using the excuse of bringing her phone as a way to see what was going on. It was around 11:30 a.m. when I got to Riverstone Realty. I asked the receptionist if I could return Emma's phone to her, but after making a few calls, she said Emma wasn't available. I mentioned that I already had her phone and wanted to hand it to her personally. The receptionist casually told me that Emma had left with Mr. Thomas for lunch, and they often ate at his house or the country club. My stomach twisted into a knot. Instead of going home, I drove to Mark's house. I'd been there once for a company holiday party, and it was just as grand as I remembered. A huge, gaudy mansion with a swimming pool the size of a small lake, and Mark's shiny red SUV parked out front. The front door was unlocked, so I let myself in, and from the upstairs, I could hear noises. My heart pounded as I dialed Emma's phone. I heard it ring, muffled behind the bedroom door. Bracing myself, I called out, "Hey Mark, it's Kevin. I've got Emma's phone. Can I talk to her?" Mark's voice answered, casual as ever, "Hey, Kevin. We're just leaving the club. Emma's in the restroom." I stood outside the bedroom, listening to him lie through his teeth. I cracked the door open and saw Mark standing there. "Amy, your husband's on the phone," he called out toward the bathroom. Emma, wrapped in a towel, casually sat on the bed. Her body language, the way they acted around each other. It was obvious this wasn't their first time. "Hey, Kevin," Emma said, as if nothing was wrong, playing along like she hadn't been caught. "Thanks for finding my phone." I pushed the door all the way open and stepped into the room. "Well, Emma," I said, pointing at her, "I don't think your phone's in Mark's bed." Mark bolted into the bathroom like a scared kid, while Emma stayed seated, calm as ever. "Get dressed," I said firmly. "We need to talk." "No," she replied, her voice cold. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy with how things are." I stood there in disbelief. "So, you're happy being a cheating liar?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady. Emma didn't even flinch. "I'm sorry you found out like this, Kevin," she said, her voice calm, almost indifferent. "But I want more out of life than what you can offer me. Mark can give me that now, not in some far-off future." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're really trading in our marriage for this?" I asked, gesturing around the room, which suddenly felt suffocating. "I'm not throwing anything away," Emma replied, her tone cold and steady. "I've been by your side for 15 years, scraping by. I deserve better now. I'm tired of pinching pennies, cutting coupons, and waiting for sales. I want more, and Mark can give it to me. I'm asking you to respect my decision." "Respect what? Your affair?" I said, my voice rising. "And Mark hiding in the bathroom like a coward?" She just shrugged. The room felt like it was closing in around me. I tossed her phone back onto the bed, flipping her off as I walked out the door. "You two deserve each other. I've got flights tomorrow. Get out of my house by the end of the month." For the next 2 weeks, I walked around in a daze, trapped in a loop of shock and disbelief. They say grief has stages, but I was stuck in denial, unable to process what had happened. How could Emma, the woman I'd loved and trusted for so long, do this to me? Had I missed the signs? As a pilot, I was trained to catch even the smallest details, but when it came to my own life, I'd been completely blind. Each morning, I woke up expecting to find her next to me, only to have the harsh reality come crashing down all over again. By the 3rd week, the emotional pain hit harder than any physical wound I'd ever experienced. Emma hadn't just broken my heart, she destroyed it. The only thing keeping me afloat was the support of Sam and his wife, Elena. They were the only ones I could confide in, and they were just as shocked. For them, abandoning a spouse was unthinkable. Sam had taken a bullet when he and Elena fled Puerto Rico, and she'd nursed him back to health while they drifted on a raft, waiting to be rescued. The two of them had built a life in the U.S., working tirelessly while raising 6 kids. Their love and loyalty were unwavering, something Emma clearly no longer understood. At the end of the month, things went from bad to worse when the bank called. I was overdrawn. Emma had emptied all our accounts. Worse, I couldn't get a new line of credit. The bank refused to help because Mark Thomas was one of their top clients. To top it all off, a guy served me divorce papers in the parking lot as I was heading to my truck. I realized I was in deep trouble. I did some research and found out that Emma was claiming that all the repairs I'd made on my old pickup were somehow equal to the value of her new Camry. She had cashed out everything we had, leaving me with the house and a grossly inflated appraisal. I had just 10 days to prevent foreclosure. Sam's son, Ricky, who was studying law, took a look at the papers with one of his professors. They warned me that I was at a disadvantage. Emma's new relationship with Mark had given her access to a team of powerful lawyers. I didn't stand a chance in court. Desperate for cash, I sold my truck for $7,000, which allowed me to keep the house and cover my bills for the next year. When I wasn't flying, I picked up odd jobs working with Sam's cleaning crews. I biked everywhere to save money and lived as cheaply as possible. I survived mostly on meals that Elena insisted I take home with me. She even tried setting me up with some women she knew, but I could barely afford a cup of coffee, let alone a date. By the start of the second year, the divorce was behind me, and I was starting to get my life back on track. I even took some time off to work on the house. One afternoon, I stumbled across a box filled with Emma's old postcards, the ones she'd collected from all the places we'd visited. My first thought was to burn them just to get some warmth in the cold house, but instead, I rode my bike to the library and sent Emma an email about the postcards. She replied within the hour, "Those cards represent where I've been, not where I'm going. Do what you want with them." I printed out her message and mine for my records, then went home and built a fire. That night, I roasted marshmallows while I watched those postcards go up in flames. For the first time in a long while, I slept peacefully, and when I woke up, Emma wasn't the first thing on my mind. 2 years passed without a word from Emma. Then, on a Friday night while I was taxiing the plane onto the runway, a flight attendant mentioned a disruptive passenger who wouldn't turn off his phone. I offered to handle it, expecting the usual situation. Stern warning, compliance, problem solved. But when I approached the row, I couldn't believe my eyes. The passenger causing the scene was none other than Mark Thomas, drunk and shouting into his phone. Even more shocking, his companion was my ex-wife, Emma. But she looked completely different. Her hair was bleached blonde, she was dripping with jewelry, and plastic surgery had altered her face. It was clear now where all the money had gone. Well, at least she didn't waste it, I muttered to myself. Switching into professional mode, I approached Mark. "Mr. Thomas, you need to turn off your phone for the safety of the flight," I said firmly. "Buzz off, flyboy," he snapped. "I'm closing a deal worth more than your entire airline." I turned to Emma, hoping she'd back me up. She just stared out the window, completely ignoring me. I sighed, walked back to the cockpit, and made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be returning to the terminal for a brief delay. Thank you for your patience." By the time we reached the gate, airport security was already waiting. 3 officers, followed by a Homeland Security agent, boarded the plane. Mark's day took a sharp turn for the worse when he was escorted off in handcuffs, charged with interfering with a flight crew and endangering the safety of an aircraft, both federal crimes, since we were already on the runway. The Homeland Security agent told me that Mark would be spending the weekend in a holding cell since federal courts don't operate on weekends, and to top it all off, he'd be placed on the no-fly list for 90 days. As they led him away, I couldn't help but think, well, couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. As I taxied the plane back out later that evening, I found myself sitting at Sam and Elena's kitchen table, celebrating their daughter's acceptance into medical school. Sam, glowing with pride, said, "She's going to be a brain surgeon." I smiled, declining another drink. Watching their happiness made me think of everything I'd lost with Emma. "Not like that good-for-nothing Emma," Elena remarked bluntly. "Kevin, let me set you up with a nice Latina. I'll find someone who treats you right." I chuckled. Elena, with her thick accent, was always trying to play matchmaker. "I'm a little cautious after the last one," I joked. Elena mumbled something to Sam in Spanish, and then Sam chimed in. "You're better off without her, Captain." "No argument there," I shrugged, scooting closer to the table. Elena leaned in, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. She didn't know what she had, and her life's not so great anymore. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Come on, Elena. What do you know?" Elena, with her network of housekeepers and cleaners, always had the juiciest gossip, more reliable than any news outlet. She lowered her voice. "Word is, Emma's not doing well. The other wives call her a lemon pie, 'cause they're scared she'll try to steal their husbands. She throws parties, but only the men show up. They treat her like a trophy, and it drives her and Mr. Thomas crazy. No one wants to be seen with her." I tried to keep a straight face but nearly burst out laughing. Elena wasn't done. "Emma's upset because Mark won't marry her. He doesn't give her much money, and he doesn't trust her at all. He checks her phone and even hired a private investigator to tail her. When she found out, she lost it." I poured myself a drink and shrugged. "Well, what do you expect? No honor among thieves." They're both living in a web of distrust. Elena smirked. That's not all. I send older ladies to clean for Mr. Thomas because he's always trying to get handsy with the younger ones. But Emma blames the staff, says they're rude to him. Of course, that's not true. If Emma can't keep him happy, why blame the help? I said sarcastically. No one wants to work for them anyway. He never tips, Elena laughed. Sam, trying to steer the conversation in a lighter direction, jumped in. Captain, we're going golfing tomorrow at Nine Pines. You play golf, right? I gave him a surprised look. You? Golf? Sam nodded. When we moved here, Elena noticed that successful people played golf, so she bought me a set of clubs and signed me up for lessons, on sale, of course. Even the kids play, but she never lets me rent a golf cart. Elena gave him a stern look. We're saving for college. God gave you legs, use them. Sam raised his hands in surrender, but smiled and squeezed her hand. I finished my drink, said my goodbyes, and headed home. The next day, Sam brought along his son's clubs for me to use since I had sold mine for extra cash after the divorce. It was the first time in ages that I wasn't busy with flying or working on the house. We were having a great time until I spotted something that soured my mood. A large photo of Mark Thomas and Emma hanging in the clubhouse. Mark, a board member of Nine Pines Country Club, was posing with Emma at some event. Sam noticed my frustration and said, Captain, keep an eye on the entrance for me. Let me know if anyone's coming. Confused but curious, I stood guard for a few minutes. All clear, I finally said, turning around to see what Sam had been up to. I couldn't help but laugh when I saw the photo. Sam had drawn a handlebar mustache, devil horns, and crooked teeth on Mark's face. Emma didn't escape his artistic flair either. He'd given her a massive nose and oversized ears. What are you, 12? I chuckled, but I felt my mood lift. Let's go play golf. Sam grinned, and we headed out. We were having a blast until we reached the 7th hole. Ahead of us, an elderly man was preparing to take his shot when suddenly he collapsed, clutching his chest. Sam and I dropped our bags and sprinted over as his wife frantically tried to call for help. He's not breathing, I yelled, immediately starting chest compressions. Sam, start CPR. I can't get a signal, the wife cried, panicking. Run to the clubhouse. I shouted. She hesitated but then bolted toward the clubhouse while Sam and I took turns performing CPR. After what felt like an eternity, about 10 exhausting minutes, a golf cart came zooming over, nearly running over my foot. The girl driving the beverage cart jumped out, knelt beside me, and opened a small case. It was a portable defibrillator, just like the ones you see in airports. Stand back, she said firmly, attaching the sensors to the man's chest. She pressed the button, and his body jolted. A moment later, his eyes fluttered open. He's breathing, but he needs medical help fast, she said, her voice calm. I wiped sweat from my forehead and glanced at her. A young, slender woman with a name tag that read Laura. Just then, a Ford F-250 truck came speeding toward us, driven by Sam. He grinned as he pulled up. Recognize your old truck, Captain, he joked. The golf cart died. We quickly loaded the man into the truck, with Laura riding up front and me taking the driver's seat. As we tore across the golf course, she directed me to a path, but I insisted on my own route, one I knew like the back of my hand from countless flights overhead. Laura was on the phone with the hospital, rattling off medical jargon like a seasoned pro. I joked, not bad for a drink cart girl. As we raced to the hospital, she shot back, I'm a nurse, dumbass. I could only manage an "oh" as we screeched into the emergency entrance, where doctors were waiting. For about a week, Sam and I were treated like heroes at the airport, but not long after, I got a letter from Nine Pines Country Club billing me $2,000 for damages to the course. They even threatened legal action if I didn't pay, but I just laughed and tossed the letter in the trash. What could they take from me? I never did find out if the man recovered, but he was airlifted out shortly after being stabilized. I tried to call Laura, but found out she no longer worked at the club. After a week of searching, I finally asked Elena for help. In less than 15 minutes, she had all of Laura's information. Her phone number, address, and probably even her favorite ice cream flavor, thanks to her network of Latino women. Elena started talking about Laura like she was giving a full report. Laura is 26, the only daughter of an immigrant laborer she took care of until he passed away. Her mother died when she was young. She's not married, recently got her nursing degree but hasn't taken the exam yet. She works the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift at Mercy Nursing Home, rents a room, and loves vanilla ice cream with sprinkles. That's it, Elena teased with a grin. No birthmarks, no warrants. Elena smiled knowingly. Laura is a good girl. Goes to Mass every Sunday at St. Paul's. Want me to set you two up? She asked, already reaching for her phone. No, Elena. I jumped up, laughing. Thanks for the phone number and address. I'll take it from here. I could still hear her laughing as I left the house. The next day, I showed up at Laura's place with flowers. She was sitting on her front steps and smiled when she saw the surprise on my face. Why'd you wait so long, Kevin? She teased. How did you know I was coming? I stammered. She laughed. The Latino Women's Network works both ways, Kevin. I shook my head, following her up the stairs. Stay here while I put these in water, she said, taking the flowers inside. Laura was easy to talk to. She told me how she balanced nursing school, a job at the nursing home, and serving drinks at Nine Pines Country Club until recently. What happened to the club job? I asked. Laura wrinkled her nose. After that wild ride in your truck, the board fired me. Said I left early. I know it was Mark Thomas. He's been trying to sleep with me since I started there. Now he's got his secretary over every Wednesday for lunch. Laura shuddered. I wasn't shocked. The Latino Women's Network was always buzzing with stories about Mark and Emma. Kevin, you know the rumors, right? Laura said, sounding hesitant. Some gossip says your wife left because she switched teams. Others think you might be gay. I nearly choked. What? Where did that come from? She looked a little embarrassed. Well, some of the women on the cleaning crew were more than willing to help you move on. When you didn't react, they figured you weren't into women. I laughed hard. Oh, you mean Anita and her friends from Orlando? Tell them I noticed. I just have a rule. No dating at work. Laura chuckled. Good to know. But, did your ex-wife follow that rule? To be blunt, I replied, Emma can go to hell. We spent more and more time together after that, but it wasn't quite what I expected. One morning, after a great day working on the house, I finally worked up the nerve. Laura, I've been thinking, would you move in with me? She raised an eyebrow. Kevin, I'm not the kind of woman who moves in after one good night. Laura, I want you with me every night, I said, admiring her. It's practical too, you'd save on rent, and you'd have more time to focus on passing your nursing exam. She crossed her arms. I'm not a freeloader, Kevin. I'm not trading myself for a place to live. You're not freeloading. I teased, grabbing her towel. You've already done so much work fixing up the house. Honestly, I should be paying you for everything you've done. Laura laughed, threw the towel back at me, and sat down on the bed, thinking. I held my breath, waiting for her response. Finally, Laura turned to me and said, Kevin, do you think Sam would let us borrow his truck to move my stuff on Friday? We had been together for over 6 months now, and the house was in better shape than it had ever been. I was content. Between cleaning houses and flying as many hours as the FAA allowed, I kept busy, but Laura had brought a new light into my life. I thought about proposing, but I knew her focus was on getting her nursing license and building her career before even thinking about settling down. Around this time, the housing market crash hit our town hard, and no company took a bigger hit than Riverstone Realty, where Mark Thomas had been working. Within a week, his entire operation crumbled. Banks pulled out their loans, and the whole business folded like a poorly built deck of cards. Federal regulators got involved, revealing that Mark had been juggling finances, mortgaging properties he didn't even own, and leveraging deals that were bound to fail. He didn't even have enough money to file for bankruptcy. Facing the impossible mess, Mark made a tragic decision. One night, he pulled his car into the garage, left it running, and never came out. I felt bad for the people left to clean up his financial disaster, but not for him. Oddly enough, I didn't give much thought to how it would affect my ex-wife, Emma. She was out of my life. My focus was on my future with Laura. A few weeks later, as I was walking home from the bus stop, I saw a figure sitting on my front porch. It was getting dark, but even in the fading light, I recognized who it was. "Hey, Emma," I said, standing over her. "Hey, Kevin," she replied, looking up at me but not moving from where she sat. "I'd like to say it's good to see you, but that would be a lie," I said, trying to hide my irritation. "It's been a long day, and I just want to get inside." Emma didn't move. "Why are you walking, Kevin? Where's your truck?" "You're sitting on the reason I sold it," I said dryly. Emma looked confused. "Oh, you sold it for the house. I understand. But why? You loved that truck?" "I loved a lot of things, Emma," I said, my voice cold. "But life teaches you how to live without them. That truck never let me down, unlike other things. I still miss it." "What about me, Kevin? Do you ever miss me?" Emma asked softly, almost pleading. "Of course," I replied sarcastically. "I miss you like I miss a migraine." She sighed, but I didn't stop. "Besides, how can I miss you? You're still here, aren't you?" "Kevin, please, can we talk? I just got out of the hospital 2 weeks ago," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, still indifferent. "I wish you a quick recovery, but I don't see how that concerns me anymore. You made it clear a long time ago that I wasn't enough for you." "Kevin, please," she continued. "Mark's dead. That night, I almost died too." "Yeah, I heard about his little stunt in the garage nearly taking you with him," I replied, my tone sharp. "Guess those big gas guzzlers are as dangerous as they say. Maybe you should have convinced him to drive a hybrid." "That's not funny, Kevin," Emma said, her voice cracking. "I'm not trying to be funny," I said, rubbing my chin, suddenly feeling tired. "Look, Emma, maybe it's best we go our separate ways for good." "Kevin, please," she begged, her voice softer now. "Let's go inside. Just for a few minutes. I need to talk to you." I sighed, reluctantly gesturing toward the door. As Emma struggled to stand, I noticed how much had changed. She was still tall, but something about her face seemed different. In the dim light, I saw she was leaning heavily on a cane. I quietly picked up her gym bag as she made her way up the steps. Opening the door, I thought to myself, this is going to be a tough conversation. We sat at the dining table, and under the bright kitchen light, I saw how much she had changed. Her face was lopsided, one side frozen, with her eyelid drooping and the corner of her mouth pulled down. Her exaggerated lips only made the unevenness more striking. She kept dabbing at the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief, wiping away a bit of drool. "I had a stroke, Kevin," Emma began, her voice uneven. "The carbon monoxide caused it. I would have died if the maid hadn't come earlier than usual that day. One side of my body is weak now, and my short-term memory is terrible. It gets worse when I'm tired." "I'm sorry to hear that, Emma. How are you managing now?" I asked, doing my best to keep my tone neutral. "That's why I'm here," she said, looking down. "I need help, Kevin. I need money." I nearly spit out the sip of coffee I had just taken, coughing to clear my throat. "You've got to be kidding me. I'm sorry for your situation, but I'm barely scraping by myself, and we both know why." She avoided my gaze, her eyes fixed on the table. "Besides," I continued, "didn't you have assets from your time with Mark? Last time I saw you, you were dripping in diamonds." Emma wiped her mouth again, her hand trembling. "It's all gone. Mark sold everything off, trying to keep creditors at bay before the collapse. What little was left got taken by the bankruptcy lawyers. After it happened, the house became a crime scene. I only got back in last week and could barely grab this bag of clothes." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying, but old emotions began bubbling up to the surface. "Have you applied for social services or disability?" I asked, trying to stay composed. "I applied, but those programs take months to review, and they told me my injuries don't qualify for full disability. I won't be getting much help," she explained, her voice shaking. "And none of Mark's friends are willing to help you out?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Emma let out a bitter laugh. "No, not anymore. They all want to keep their distance. They're afraid I'll start hitting on their husbands for money. Honestly, I can't even blame them after everything that's happened. I've burned so many bridges," Emma admitted, her voice breaking. Most of our mutual friends took your side. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. All right, Emma. Sell the Camry. It's still worth something. Emma looked away, her voice trembling. The Camry, it's gone. Mark bought it for me, but the title was in Riverstone Realty's name. The bank took it when everything collapsed. A surge of anger flared up in me. You got that car barely 4 months after we moved here. You started seeing him before the ink on the mortgage was even dry, didn't you? Emma turned her head, avoiding eye contact. Kevin, it wasn't like that. Mark and I didn't get together until 6 months after I started working for him. I couldn't help myself. Oh, my mistake. I didn't mean to suggest your virtue was tarnished because you waited an extra 2 months to jump into his bed. Kevin, don't you think I know I messed up? She snapped, her voice shaking. This is hard for me too. I never wanted us to end up like this. I studied her for a moment, then leaned back in my chair. Do you really want to go into this? I asked, waving my hand. She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, Kevin, I think I need to. They say the truth sets you free, I muttered. Go on, give it a try. It's not about trying, she said, her voice softer now. I just want you to know that none of this was your fault. It was me. I let myself get caught up in it all. You didn't do anything wrong. I stayed quiet, watching her struggle with her words. At first, it was great when I started at Riverstone Realty. I felt important, like someone actually valued me, she explained. Mark gave me attention, bought me things, and suddenly I was surrounded by people who made me feel like I was somebody. You were somebody, Emma, I said, my tone sharp. You were my wife, my partner. We've been together since we were kids. Wasn't that enough for you? She lowered her gaze. I see that now. I wish I'd realized it back then. It all started when you left for that 3-day charter flight. Mark invited me to a political fundraising dinner. $2,500 a plate. My meal alone could have paid 2 months of our mortgage. I snorted. Chicken or fish? Kevin, I'm being serious, she snapped, exasperated. So am I replied, my smirk fading. Go on. Mark had been sweet to me for weeks, but this time it felt different. He bought me a $2,000 evening gown and didn't even blink at the price. Everyone at the dinner thought I was his girlfriend, and they treated me like a VIP. We even sat with a former vice president. It was intoxicating. By the end of the night, we ended up in his Hummer, in the parking lot. The valet must have gotten quite the tip, I muttered, sarcasm dripping from my voice. Kevin, stop. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Emma? Classy? Fun in a parking lot sounds like something you'd see on a street corner. Did you crack open the moonroof to make it more romantic? Emma's face flushed with embarrassment, but she pressed on. I felt guilty the next day. I was terrified you'd find out. When you came home, I practically clung to you, trying to make up for what I'd done. Wow, I said, shaking my head. And here I thought you were just being grateful to all the plumbers. Kevin, I promised myself it wouldn't happen again. I swore I'd be the best wife, but Mark kept apologizing, saying we'd had too much to drink, that it was a mistake. He didn't want to lose me as an employee over one slip-up. He was so smooth, and I fell for it. A week later, I went with him and some executives to the coast for a big project. He chartered a private jet. And I'm sure the jet had a nice bathroom, I said coldly. Emma winced but kept going. On the way back, Mark closed a huge multimillion-dollar deal. There was celebrating, drinking, and it happened again. This time, it was in the plane's bathroom. After that, I couldn't stop. The lifestyle was addicting. Gambling, fancy dinners, jewelry, at first, only when you were away. But then it became lunch dates and secret meetups. I started resenting you, Kevin. Our life together felt small compared to everything Mark offered. I stared at her, anger boiling beneath the surface. And you didn't think to end it? Not even once. I told myself it was just a phase, that I'd get out of it soon. But I couldn't let go. All these new things made me feel like royalty. I was somebody important. I didn't want to go back to being just me. She looked down, wiping the corner of her mouth again. When you found me in Mark's bedroom that day, I panicked. I knew there was no going back, that you'd never forgive me. But at that moment, Half a life with Mark seemed better than nothing. I leaned forward, my eyes hard. How about choosing the truth, Emma? You could have come to me after the first time. Maybe we could have worked through it. Believe it or not, she said, her voice wavering, I was going to end it. I planned to break it off with Mark in 2 days, even if you hadn't caught us. I was going to quit my job and leave Mark that Friday. Cold turkey, Emma said, her voice trembling. I was ready to commit myself to you, to our marriage. I'd even printed and signed my resignation letter. It was sitting in my desk drawer. I laughed bitterly. Nice try, Emma. Makes me wish I hadn't walked in on you too. Just 2 more days and everything would have been fine, right? I'm such an idiot for ruining your perfect plan, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Let me guess, no letter, right? She shook her head. No, Kevin, I don't have it. But it's true. Sure, I muttered. And then you moved in with Mark and got bored. Funny how that works. Emma hesitated, then tried to smile. It wasn't as exciting as I thought. Everything revolved around him, and I started finding ways to have fun on my own. Here's the classic question, I said, leaning forward, my eyes locked on hers. Was Mark better in bed than me? I saw her freeze, searching for a response. If I wanted someone to lie to me, I'd hire a professional. Just tell me the truth. Emma sighed deeply. You were my first, Kevin, and for a long time, the only one. We were always good together. But Mark, he was older, more experienced. He'd been with a lot of women, and I felt indebted to him for everything he gave me. So, payment for services rendered, I said, my words cutting like glass. I wasn't promiscuous, if that's what you're implying, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. What do you call it when someone trades favors for things? I shot back. That was different, she replied stiffly. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I muttered. Whatever, Kevin. But no, we never did it in our house. Never in our bed, she insisted. Not once. I pressed. No, she repeated firmly. Mark wanted to, but for me, it wasn't about the affair, or even about him. It was the lifestyle. For the first time, I was living in first class. I felt like I was rising above everything. I leaned back, looking around our modest home. So you didn't want to come back to this? Emma nodded slightly. Exactly. I was swept up in the glamour, the power. Mark paraded me around like a trophy, but he hated it if I even spoke to another man. The irony was, he had girlfriends everywhere. Escorts when he traveled, call girls for his trips. But when it came to me, he wanted control. Just us. And you were okay with all that? I asked, incredulous. Not really, she admitted, her voice faltering. I gave in once with his second wife. They were still on good terms, but I hated every moment of it. She was this fake, bleach blonde, plastic trophy, a caricature of everything I once despised. So, what was the difference between the two of you? I asked coldly. Touch? Feel? Or was it the brand of the silicone? Emma wrinkled her nose, looking embarrassed. As ridiculous as it sounds, I thought she had it all. Money, status, a front row seat to everything I thought I wanted. I used to laugh at women like her, and then I became one. Plastic and hollow. I couldn't help but smirk. Did I pay for her makeup, or was that on Mark's tab? Emma flinched. No, Kevin. It wasn't your money. Mark hid the surgery costs in some corporate project budget. I'm sure the auditors will find out eventually. Always the negotiator, aren't you? I said, my tone mocking. Maybe you can use some of the tricks Mark taught you in the bedroom to settle with the auditors. Kevin, please, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I can't live like this anymore. I want to disappear. I shook my head, anger welling up again. If you're planning to go out the way Mark did, I can't help you. I've got a garage, but no car. I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth, but I couldn't stop. The anger had been bubbling up inside me for so long, and now it was spilling over. I thought I'd moved on, but had I? Love and hate, they really were two sides of the same coin. I wasn't sure whether I was more disgusted with her or furious at what she had done to me, to our life together. Kevin, Emma said softly, I know I've made mistakes, but before all this, We were always there for each other. We've been through so much. Can't we try to hold on to that? I stood up, my body tense. Emma, I'd rather chew tin foil and shave my head with a cheese grater. I took a final sip of my now cold coffee and set the cup down. I don't even know who you are anymore. I can't trust you. For all I know, you've stashed away some cash or jewelry and are just waiting for the dust to settle so you can leave me with nothing. Emma's shoulders slumped, her hope draining from her face. Kevin, I'll never leave you again. Please, I need your help. I'm sorry, Emma. I can't take that risk. Not again. Can't or won't? She asked quietly, her voice almost defeated. Is there a difference? I replied. Just then, the front door opened and Laura walked in, still in her nursing uniform, practical and floral, fresh from her afternoon shift. She stopped in her tracks, taking in the scene. Oh, hi, Laura said, her eyes moving between the two of us. She walked over to Emma and leaned in slightly, offering her hand. I'm Laura, and you are? With some effort, Emma raised her hand to shake. I'm Emma, she said softly. Laura froze for just a second, then quickly recovered, her eyes moving to Emma's cane and the drooping side of her face. Bell's palsy? She asked, pointing at Emma's face. I beg your pardon? Emma replied, confused. Bell's palsy, Laura repeated, her tone clinical. It damages the nerve that controls the facial muscles, causing paralysis. Sometimes it's brought on by stress or even herpes. I don't have herpes, Emma snapped, then softened her tone. But I can see why you'd think that, after everything I did to Kevin. She sighed and explained to Laura about her stroke, detailing the whole story. When she was done, Laura pulled me aside into the kitchen. Kevin, Laura began. We can't just throw Emma out on the street. Okay, I replied. I'll call one of Sam's sons. They can drop her off at a shelter. Laura squeezed my hand so hard I felt her nails dig into my skin. Kevin, you can't be serious. You can't leave her in a place like that. They'd tear her apart. And what do you expect me to do, Laura? Invite her into our bed? You heard what she said. It wouldn't be her first time sharing with another woman, I retorted, raising an eyebrow and giving her a mocking smile. Laura let go of my hand and waved me off. You men are all the same. Put your fantasies away. More like a nightmare, I muttered. Losing you to Emma would have me sucking on a tailpipe. Whatever, Laura rolled her eyes. Emma can sleep on the couch tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. I snorted. So now you're playing keep your enemies closer, huh? I asked, recalling how Laura had jabbed Emma with that herpes comment earlier. Laura looked away, her voice softer now. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. It was mean, kicking someone when they're already down. She sighed, and for a moment, we stood in silence. I remembered what Emma had done to me, the bitterness still fresh. It's just one night, I muttered. But you better count the silverware in the morning. Kevin, we don't own anything worth stealing, Laura replied, shaking her head. Doesn't it bother you at all that your ex, with her history, is sleeping under the same roof? Laura gave me a serious look. I trust you. I know who you are. And besides, if you leave me for someone like that, you were never really mine in the first place. Trust me, Laura, that's never going to happen. You're stuck with me, I said, pulling her into a kiss. The next morning at 6 a.m., I was in the kitchen, dressed in my work jumpsuit. I wasn't flying that day, but I had 3 houses to clean for Sam's wife's company. Good morning, Kevin, Emma said quietly from the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. Her hair was tied back, and after a night on the couch, she looked even more worn out than before. I hummed in response, focusing on my cup of coffee, refusing to engage. Kevin, do you still have our boxes of postcards? Emma asked, yawning. Those were your cards, Emma. No, I don't have them. Where are they? She pressed. I burned them, I replied flatly. Roasted marshmallows over them. Actually, it was kind of like watching our past go up in flames. Oh, she said, her expression falling. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Finally, Emma spoke again. Kevin, I just want to thank you for letting me stay the night. Don't thank me, Emma. It wasn't my idea. Thank Laura, I said, my tone colder than I intended. Emma hesitated. Laura, you and her? I didn't answer. My relationship with Laura wasn't any of Emma's business. Kevin, she started, wiping saliva from her cracked lips. I don't know if I said it last night, but I'm sorry. For what, exactly? I asked, my voice ice cold. For cheating? For leaving me? For draining our accounts and wrecking our marriage? Or maybe it's for trying to take even more after you left me bankrupt. Be specific, Emma. I'm sorry I wanted more than you did, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. That sounds more like regret than an apology, I said, standing up and pouring the rest of my coffee into the sink. Tell me, Emma, if everything hadn't collapsed around you, if you still had everything from the past 3 years, would you still be here? Emma didn't answer right away, but as I rinsed my cup, I heard her murmur, I'm sorry I left you. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned around. Emma stood close, a hopeful look on her face. Seems like someone's happy I stayed the night, she said, forcing a smile. Don't flatter yourself, I muttered, brushing her off. Her smile faded, but she didn't give up. Kevin, I meant what I said last night. I'm yours. I'll always be yours. You can have me, anytime, anywhere. She held out her hand, waiting for me to take it. I stared at her hand for a moment, feeling nothing but a hollow ache. I've seen this show before, Emma. I'll pass. I turned away, heading for the door, knowing this was far from over. Later that day, I realized my first real fight with Laura was going to be over Emma. I wanted Emma out of my life, out of my house, and someone else's problem. But Laura and Elena had other ideas. Both women lashed out at me, while Sam wisely stayed out of the crossfire. I wished I could have done the same. All their talk about forgiveness, Christian charity, and turning the other cheek sounded noble in theory, but in practice, it was exhausting. 2 devout Catholic women, convinced that God was on their side, were an unstoppable force. They were convinced it was our moral duty to help Emma, no matter how things had ended. Laura kept quoting scriptures about casting your bread upon the waters, while Elena compared the situation to saints who had forgiven their betrayers. I'm no saint, I grumbled, and any resemblance between me and Jesus is purely accidental. They weren't discouraged. They pointed out that I had once loved Emma enough to marry her, and that should count for something now, despite how things had ended. Good grief. I would have preferred dealing with rabid badgers over these 2. Laura dismissed Emma's recent attempt to seduce me as a form of trauma, a desperate grasp at the safety of the past after her world collapsed. It's just her way of trying to reconnect, Laura insisted. I sighed, knowing deep down that Laura was a better person than I could ever be. I couldn't buy into Laura's belief that Emma deserved any sympathy. Eventually, though, Elena found Emma a job cleaning houses, a far cry from the life she'd once known. The best place we could set her up was the small mother-in-law apartment above the garage, which Laura arranged. Emma paid a modest rent, which helped cover some bills, but I mostly kept my distance. Laura and Emma occasionally sat on the porch talking, but I wasn't interested in making small talk with the ghost of my past. Who wants to watch a train wreck on repeat? I joked quietly to myself whenever I saw them sitting together. Laura assured me that Emma had changed, kept to herself, went to church regularly, and was trying to put her life back together. But I didn't buy it. The bitterness still simmered just below the surface. I had plenty of opinions about where Emma should go, but I kept most of them to myself, only muttering when I was sure no one could hear. To her credit, though, Emma never tried any stunts or attempted to rekindle anything with me. A few months went by, and things began to settle into an uneasy calm. One evening, after coming home from work, I saw Laura on the porch, talking with an older woman I vaguely recognized. Her silver hair and posture were familiar, but I couldn't quite place her. I walked over to introduce myself, but before I could extend my hand, the woman pulled me into a tight hug. Kevin, don't you remember Mrs. Talone? Laura said, smiling. Suddenly, it hit me. This was the wife of the man who had the heart attack on the golf course, the man Sam and I had saved. You've got to come in, Mrs. Talone said, practically dragging me toward the door. He's been waiting for you all day, grumbling like an old bear. Waiting for me? I asked, confused as I followed her inside. Sitting at the dining room table, surrounded by a pile of documents, was the man from the golf course. His hair was silver now, but he still had that sharp look of authority about him. "Damn boy! Get over here!" he barked, tapping the chair next to him with his cane. "I'm Boone Talon, and I've been waiting a long time to meet the man who saved my skin." Slightly intimidated, I sat beside him, and before I knew it, he slapped me on the back so hard I almost spilled out of the chair. "Mind if I call you Kevin?" Boone grinned, not bothering to wait for my answer. "I owe you, son, and Boone Talon always pays his debts." He tossed a sheet of paper onto my lap. "This here's a personal services contract. I've got a Learjet 60, and I need you to be one of my pilots once you're certified. The contract's for 15 years, annual raises, bonuses, and it renews every year, whether I'm alive or not. Just don't crash the plane. If you do, you're dead anyway, so I figure that solves the problem of not getting paid." He chuckled. I glanced at the numbers on the contract and felt my heart skip a beat. The pay was astronomical, like something out of a dream. "Mr. Talon, I don't know what to say. This is more than generous, but—" "But nothing," Boone interrupted, his voice gruff but good-natured. "You think saving my life isn't worth a few bucks? Hell, the insurance company should be thanking you too. You kept them from having to pay out a hefty life insurance policy." Still stunned, I sat in silence as Boone slid another stack of papers toward me. "And here's the deed to your house, fully paid for. Can't have my pilots worrying about mortgages when they're supposed to be flying me around. Consider it a signing bonus." He winked, then added, "And there's a brand new F-250 waiting for you at the dealership. Pick it up tomorrow. No more standing around at bus stops." I didn't know what to say, but Boone wasn't finished. "That $1.4 million mess with Nine Pines? Don't worry about it. My lawyers will handle everything, and you'll have a full membership and an apology by the end of the week." He then turned to Laura, his eyes softening slightly. "Now, young lady, we need to get you that nursing license. I've arranged tutors, and you'll pass the test in 90 days. After that, you'll work at All Saints Hospital in pediatrics and cardiology. And don't worry about those student loans. They're paid off. In a year, you'll be my personal flying nurse." Laura, completely stunned, threw her arms around Boone in a hug. He chuckled. "Careful now, girl. You'll knock my pacemaker loose." I thanked him profusely, but I couldn't leave out Sam. "What about Sam? He was there with me that day." Boone grinned. "Sam's all taken care of. He's getting certified on the Lear 65, and I've paid off his kids' tuition and loans. He'll get a raise too." Just before leaving, Boone gave one final instruction. "Now, the two of you need to get married. I don't like my employees living in sin." Laura and I did get married, though it turned into a much bigger event than I'd anticipated. Elena and her network of Latina women organized everything, with Boone footing the bill, including a cruise as our wedding gift. Emma was there, too, but things between us remained distant. She was doing better, still using a cane and struggling with memory issues, but she had found someone new from her church. I wished them well. As for me, my new job brought together my two great loves, Laura and flying. Laura sent postcards to Emma from every place we visited, and they'd sit on the porch, talking over the details. But soon, things would change. Laura had to stop flying for a while, because we were expecting a baby. Now, I'd have 3 loves in my life.